simplify it this time into more of an abstract design. Bracket above me. Lighter at the very end, I hope. And some of the darkness starting to get some vibrance between the warm and the cools now. Hopefully I'll be able to bring these light colours out now. I hope you enjoyed that. It's nice to do a nice loose pastel again, and using this different paper takes it on very, very strongly, and you don't have much chance to blend afterwards or add afterwards, so you've got to be direct with it. This is Well, here's the final mounted work, just to give you an idea of how they are when they're finished. But I'd like to do some looser work shortly as well. Right, well, that's the finished work. I think we'll put a mount on it now and see what it looks like with a mount. Two mediums. These sunlit leaves here. Really feel that sunshine coming. There we are, the first of the pastels on this new pastel mat paper I'm trying out, and I'm very impressed. Each pastel, but it takes it beautifully. Pastel pencils as well for the branches. And you're just blocking and blending. Hi there, well the SAA have very kindly invited me to do a write-up about the Unison Colour pastels, which I've always loved for over 20 years, and used them in many varieties and many ways, with acrylic inks, with water, different sorts of paper, and found them so versatile because you're able to take them easily in the boxes that they're sent in abroad on planes, and use them with watercolour paper or with various different methods. So what I'm going to do now is have a little chat about them, show you the sets that I use, and just a few of the possibilities of ways that they can be used, and also with this film just a small article for you, giving you lots of other ideas and ways as well, and other links to either my films or other films saying more about these wonderful Unison Colour pastels. So this scene here is growing up into my new gardens for this summer, and I shall definitely be using the pastels out here again on my own and with my students. Anyway, let's get on with it now and go inside. Now, hopefully I'll stimulate you by giving you some new ideas about the pastels. I've already given you links and descriptions to many ways of using pastels and the papers and all of the things that are about and many of the properties of the Unison Colour pastel. So what I'm going to do now is just enhance some of those ideas by doing a short film to show you some techniques and methods, and hopefully stimulate you into using your pastels with much more variety. Here I've got some ombre paper, and I've deliberately used it with the back and the front side showing, and a piece of not watercolour paper to show you how we can use watercolour paper and pastels with water and the different effects we can get with that. Going to do a poppy scene here, and just to show you how the pastels work with different techniques here. One of the beauties of working with water and pastels is that we can actually use our watercolour brushes and same sort of techniques by splattering, by sponging, by even moving with our fingers, so it's very plastic, a bit like acrylics are. So I've got my standard watercolour brushes here I'm going to put to one side, and all I'm going to use for this one is a small round, my oval mop, Pro Art oval mop, and a rake brush. You can get a finer one that's called a comb, but this is a rake. So let's look at these things more closely now. So I'll move my watercolour brush set across to the actual brush that I'm going to be using, and you see here this one called a rake has a wonderful serration here. So when we paint it, we can paint grasses, we can paint textural effects, we can even splatter with it. Ordinary round here, and the Pro Art oval mop. The beauty of these is when they're wet you can paint with them flat and just use a large stroke. You can narrow them down to being thin and do a thin stroke. So a bit like Ron Ransom when he used to paint with the tape brushes and a rigger. I've got everything I need there really. I'm going to have a paper plate here as well, so I can mix the pastel in here too, separately, to show you another technique. And what I'm going to be using, to give you an idea, the choices I have are my main sets here of 72 pastels, which I feel can do almost anything and everything around the world. It's my actual basic choice of colours that I need really all the time. I keep one set where I can actually look at the numbers and keep the papers on them, but the main working ones I always take the papers off, because you need to be able to work the pastel sideways on, not just with the ends of the pastel. So that's my main set for use everywhere. If I'm travelling, then I've narrowed it down to a basic set, which I call my travel colour here, and that 18 colours and 18 colours, and this is what you have there. Beautiful set. Again, I keep the papers on one set so I can see what numbers I've used, and then you know it as well, in case you want to repeat one of my paintings. And I also keep a sheet of all the colours on from both sets, so I can just have a laminated sheet if I want to without having those out. So that's it there. We've got the two travel sets, we've got the two main sets, again beautiful colours as you can see here, and I've got a water spray as well, and water, the three brushes I've already mentioned. As I just mentioned, I like to have the papers off the pastel so I can use them sideways. Let's just take a pastel, and we've got the back and the front of the Ingres paper here. We've got a slightly smoother side and a slightly rougher side, and if I just bring the pastel across it, see what I mean? You can see the different textures going on there, the papers, and that's quite important, because if you don't want that texture to show, then you need to choose a slightly smoother side. So when we place pastel on sideways like this, the next thing is, in the old traditional methods, is to block and blend. So we blend in, we block in the shape, and then we blend it in the first coats, and then we can add colours on top afterwards. Let's take a light one this time, go over the top of that, take a light blue, and if you put that pure on top of it, if I use the pastel again, you can see the difference in those marks. How much stronger the mark is when I haven't rubbed it, and then how it dulls down when I rub it. Pastel works by the little particles reflecting light, so when you spray it with fixative, or when you smudge it, it will dull it down, it will make it muddier. So again, let's just bring one through here, right the way through, across this that we've already blocked and blended. Make it nice and thick and heavy. There are only so many coats of pastel you can put on before it becomes muddy. Now you see that's nice and clean and bright. The harder I push, the less pastel underneath, the brighter the colour becomes. As soon as I touch it, it kills it, it makes it deader. I'll do that there and there, put it right in, then I'll come back with my pastel and come lighter over again, and you see how much lighter and brighter that is. So if we're using the old English block and blend method, then we would block in all of these colours first of all, rub it right in, leaving no paper showing at all, and then we do our final coats over the top, leaving it alone and barely touching it at all, maybe just a little bit of blending here and there. If you want to remove pastel, all we have to do is get a fairly stiff bristle brush. We can take the pastel off and down with that, so you can see the pastel actually coming away here. You don't really want to be blowing pastel dust all over the place. So if you're allergic to things like this, you can wear a mask, but normally if you're careful that isn't going to blow everywhere. Okay, so I've removed some of that now, and if I come back having removed it, you see how cleanly we can put pastel back over there again. So this colour underneath is still showing, we can still blend it, and we can use the brush to take it off. You can use a rubber, you can even use braid. Other little tips for pastels are, if you've got lots of little bits of pastel left over from boxes or little bits and pieces that are broken off, you can actually grind them all up together, mix a little bit of water with them, and then roll them into a sausage again and make your own grey pastel. So you know nothing is wasted from those pastels. Right, so that's blocking and blending. That's putting one colour on and blending it in, and then working over the top nice and cleanly. And that's an ordinary pastel paper. Now if you're using the pan pastels, it doesn't really matter whether you have slightly rougher paper or not. But on this one, we can see that you've got quite a textural surface. On this one, it's slightly smoother. So I would tend to use, for myself, the smoother side, because I really don't want the orange peel effect. Let's just do that again. We'll bring a bit of a deep colour over the top, just to show you again. So that's very smooth. You can just see the texture. And that's very textural. But we can rub it in and blend it anyway, so we lose all of those textures. You just might find the orange peel side a little bit more off-putting, and in some other papers it can be even more defined and can be very orange peely, and that can be quite off-putting. But you see how that's showing through here with the paper. It's more orange peely, and this one's blending in a lot better. So that's your own choice. If you want the texture, you can use it. If not, you don't. And the same with the watercolour paper. If we want textured surface like snow, then we can use a rough paper or a knot paper, or we can use a hot press paper with the water and pastel, which means it's going to be very nice for detail. Okay, let's go on to that now. Having just discussed the surfaces and ways of applying colour there. And as I said, one of the things is that you can only apply so many coats onto certain papers. Some papers lap it up, the more textural papers do, and suck it straight in, and you can only do 1 or 2 coats before it's almost full. Other papers allow you to blend in a lot more thinly and gradually work up, and there are all sorts of papers that we have discussed or given you links about here in this article. Let's go on to the water and pastel then and look at how we can use that. So you can see this a bit more closely now, and the texture that you get with the rougher paper and the smoother. We have 2 lovely pictures here that I've taken that we can use as demonstration pieces. I'm going to use this one for the water and pastel, and this one for just showing you the blocking and blending method. Right, I'm deliberately going to use my travel set just to show you how we can do painting like this that's fairly complicated with so few colours. First one, I'm just going to use a green just to work out my basic composition so I know where it's coming into here. This one would be quite fun with water as well, actually. That's what I'm going to need to do now, just blocking and blending. I want to start with my mid-tones and work down to my darks, and then back up towards my highlights at the end. So let's just do some blending very quickly. Right, so we'll blend in this first coat. So this is the blocking part that we're talking about. Pastel sideways on. You can see how it's filled that bite now. The base coat on there. It's ready now to work my final coats over. Well, I might put a few more sort of just glazes yet. Let's start down here and put my mid and dark tones on to here. Just work out where things are. So a very quick, very rapid method this. My greens, make it a bit darker down here. Again, if we're blending, we can mix. If we're using a more toothy paper, then often we need to put it directly on and leave it alone, because it's much harder to blend when the pastel goes right in. It clogs up very quickly. So I'm going to put this all the way around here and just start to find this area here of the... Now because I've got to blend, because I haven't got the right greens and bluey greens straight away, I'm going to have to put one colour over another to blend them in. You see how dull that is? I mean, that's gone very dull. Now I come back with my green, and we'll just start to come across some of this, bringing up these leaves in between, just tinting, just hinting at the top, and I'm still just blending a little bit because I want to have a soft background. I can now start to do the little details of some of the leaves and things. See how quickly that appears. I need to now blend with my turquoise up here because this is a much lighter green up here. It's more yellowy green, so I'm going to put my yellows and greens together. I've got a much lighter green here to go into here. Just blending it a little bit because it's the background and I don't want this texture showing yet. Just touching it with the tip of the pastel to bring it up here. Now I'm starting to come to purer colour. I want to leave that colour alone that I'm putting on more now. And it comes up to a very light cream here. And just bring that lightly over the surface. And I'm not touching this at all, I'm just going to let this glow. And back to my greens and yellows again. Let's have this. Let's start to look at some of the darker shapes and the flowers in here. I want to get some of these flower colours in. And I'm going to start with my lighter colours here to block and blend. I'm going to start with my oranges for the moment. Just to give an underpainting here. I'll come back to that in a minute. This is just to lay my reds into and let that orange glow through. There we go, over the top of the other colours. That's going to go a bit mucky. And I could use a brush to take that undercolour away if I want to. Just going to blend it very lightly on there. So this is traditional block and blend. So I'm blocking in and I'm blending as I go along. So I've got my mid-tones. I've not done my lightest tones yet. Just want the mid-tones at the moment. I'm going to come back now with my red here, this very bright cadmium. I'm going to start blending that down into there. Softly at first. It's fairly thick pastel, but I'm pushing it right in at the moment so that I'm able to come back and go over the top again to bring a second coat out, losing all of that texture of the paper that I do not want. This is why I don't like a textured paper when it's an orange peel effect. I don't mind it if it's a bite, it's really taking it in, but not when it's just an orange peel. I've got to find this lovely purples and blues in a minute, and I've only got these colours to use, so to make these I've got to do a bit of mixing. Using pure colour now. I'm not going to smudge this, I don't need to blend it the same way. Bit of yellow ochre now. So look at these beautiful blues. Well, I need a very, very light mauve turquoise, which I haven't got there, so I'm going to have to mix it. And I'm going to come in with my blue first here. This is my ultramarine blue, which is a beautiful blue, and just blend that in. You can see we've almost worked up enough pastel onto this bite. We can't put much more into it. Make sure you know where the colours are. They're coming into one, coming into another. We'll do that. Take my very deep blue now. I want to come in for these darker leaves that are coming up here. I'm going to soften those back in because they're in the distance. I want them slightly blurred. So I'm going to make these all a little bit blurred down here. Get rid of that texturing. I don't want that texturing. Very, very deep blue to black purple into here. I'm going to come around the petals here and just get this bit in. Just softening it back and getting these effects. Soften them in. You can use a little cotton wool bud if you can't quite use your finger to get things as dark as you want, as neat as you want them. I could use a lot of lighter colours over the top, and this would be the time I would start using more colour rather than blending. The moment I've just got to blend because I don't have those colours in this small box. I'm just showing you what we can do with just a limited box. Much thicker, and the colours now I'm putting on in pasto. I'm laying them on and not rubbing them in. I don't want to rub these in. I'm going to just use the tip of the pastel to do this only. Right up into here where these yellow flowers are going to come. I can start putting pure colours by twisting and turning it on. Just little blobs of colour now. And against these warmer purples and blues we've got that lovely cerulean to help make the warm seem warmer by putting this against it. Now we're coming towards our bright colours, so let's now look at the yellows happening here and really twist those on. I've got enough pastel on there, not too much, that I can just come in on top and really put these little bits of pure yellow across here, right up to here, by pushing and twisting. If I've got too much pastel on, I can't do this, and I have to take them off with a brush, but I'm just managing. And we're going to go down towards our darks as well. So let's look at some of this very warm brown. Maybe it's just coming in to make the other reds here glow a bit more. Just tickling over the surface, bringing the light out. Light against dark now, so rough against smooth in these shapes. I'll go green in a minute. Right, let's go back to our original green. Now I can lay it on purely. I don't have to smudge it at all. I can just lay it on the surface. You see I'm having to press quite hard now to make it work. I haven't used black. I'm going to come back to black now just to start to pick out some of the foreground and darks in between here to really make these poppies stand out. And back to our ultra green again. Bring some of these pure blues, beautiful pure blues into here. I'm not going to smudge them now. I say this is time for pure colour now. And where we've got the darks against the lights and the cools against the warms, we start to get more of a three-dimensional feel to it. You can see I can barely put more pastel on there. I've almost worked it. Right, that's a little demo for you on just the blocking and then the blending of colours together. Now these are the inscribes, and you see how much brighter they are, but they're also much harder. So if I use these just to give you an idea on here, now it's at the very end, I can come back in and use these very bright ones just to finish off if I haven't quite got those colours in the softer pastels. You see I've almost used up my paper now. I can't do a lot more in the way of colour because it's not going to take any more. But I think that's enough to give you a very good idea about how we can build up just with a few pastels, and how we can also use these very light ones at the end. But I want to do just for a moment to show you the difference. That if I take the yellow of this and put it on, it's quite hard to blend it. It's not bad, but it's quite hard to blend. But if I use a softer pastel, look how lovely that goes on, and how much softer and brighter it is as well. So that's quite good. But then when you compare it to something like that, that's the difference in the softer and Unison pastels to the cheap ones. So there we are then, a wee demo showing those two. Right, now I'd like to show you what we can do with pastel and water, and this is on a piece of not watercolour paper. So I'm going to use two ways here. I'm going to put the pastel on first and then some water, and then I'm going to show you how the pastel goes into the water. For that I have a spray to keep things wet, and my three brushes that I showed you earlier, a little plastic plate on the left to be able to scrape pastel into if I want to do that, or mix pastel on for splattering. So let's make a go at this, and I'm going to have a quite ambitious go at this very colourful one just to show how it will work. Let's start first with my very, very bright colours, because I've got this tremendously bright pink flower here. So I'm going to put that on there especially just to show you how the hard pastels mix first of all. That's going straight on. I'm going to use all my light colours first. A little bit down here, here. I'm going to be able to put these over the top anyway, but I just want to start off with some lighter colours before I mix my darker ones in. Now if you put the pastel straight into water, they go very dark very quickly. Remember that when you first do this, the pastels will look much darker and they'll dry out. So don't worry too much if this seems very dark at first, it will dry out. And I'm going to show you how you can draw one colour into another with the water. So for instance, having said that, let's come back with this and get some of these other greens going on in here. I'm going to blend all these greens in with water and then come back into them. Large oval mop. Straight away I can just blend that water in there, and now that's when I just put water over the top. And I want to keep these quite clean. I want that colour to stay that sort of colour. So that's how it mixes with water. If I put this colour back into it, look, it goes even darker, and that's even with the cheap pastel. This is one of the cheap inscribes. Just to give you an idea of how it will mix with water, but not as well as you're going to see the Unison Colour mix in just a minute. Textures into here, darks into lights. So let's take some of the lighter areas again And we'll make a lovely loose wet into wet sort of watercolour. And the darks, the paints, the pastels can go over this afterwards. I'm going to put the lights over this and the darks over it afterwards. I'm going to put more colours in just a minute as well. So I'm going to show you how we can use the rake brush and all these other effects for splattering and so on. So we start to get these stems. Here's the rake look, and I can bring the lights into the darks and the darks into the lights with this and get an effect of grasses and all sorts of stems. We'll see how that can work to get my textures. Light over dark, dark over light. I can bring one colour into another. I can even lighter here if I want to. Come up with some yellows and things here. And we'll deliberately texture those in. Take some water and texture, crisscrossing, getting the feeling of the stems. Or a pussycat down at my feet. So I can use this fine brush for doing, this rake brush for doing these textures, and start to texture with the sponge. Let's get some really light yellows going here. Pick those up with the edge of the sponge. You can see how it will work. Anytime I want, I can come in while it's wet and work into this. I've got a really deep blue going on here now, almost black, and I can use my fingers to bring it in. All dark through here. Beautiful effects we can get. And this is before we actually use the pastel purely dry onto dry. But if I want really pure dark, I'm going to have to put it on at the end, aren't I? So it's just to give you an idea of the effects and the fine lines and how we can use water with pastel. I can take pastel and mix it on the paper. It's rather mucky now, but we'll have a cleaner one in a minute. And let's just mix some pastel in with that paper there. And take a stiffer brush. This one will do. And we can splatter that on if we want. Remember, these are going to dry lighter. So these marks are getting the effect of all the leaves and the plants amongst this. Now that is actually fixed. You can see there, this is pastel coming off, but that's virtually fixed. It's hardly moving at all. It's only this very heavy, softer pastel that's been put on later that moves. So the rest of this is fixed with the water, and I can put pastel over it fairly easily. So let's just show we can do that. First thing I want to do is the darks. Go back to the darks again and use some water with that. So I'm going to start using, look how dark that is, almost too dark. I want a very, very deep blue again. Here we are, this one will do. That's the one I want. And right up and in here, right up and through here. Now the rest of this pastel is dry, so I can work it over. Still a bit damp there. If I find there's too much, I can go back. If I put too much pastel anywhere, remember, I can go back with the brush and I can take it off. So then I can go in afterwards and put more on. So if there's ever too much anywhere and I want to get rid of it, I can do that by just lifting off. Now with the brush I can come back, still using water, and I can paint the wet across the dry now. You can see how dark we can go, picking up that paint from the dark and moving it around. So we've got all these different ways we can do it. Now just for fun, it's all for fun, let's take some yellow. Just put some little yellow flowers into that. Little yellow and pink flowers. Let's try it and see what happens. Take my knife and very light cream, and we'll just mix up a bit of very light cream. A bit of yellow into that. So I can use that directly with the brush I can just mix up some water, make a nice paste of it, and taking a sponge, again we'll use a similar one to the one there before, and I can just go in and get some of these very light. Now this I can't do with the pastel as easily as this, but you can see how it can work. When it's wet onto dry, much better, can't you? All sorts of fun things you can do. You could brush through a gauze or through a sieve to get effects as well. I want a bristly brush this time. If I tap that across another bit of wood, yes, we should get quite a nice splatter from that. If we put it on heavily enough and thickly enough, now the paper is dry. It wouldn't have done before it was dry. If I kill it like that, you see what happens when you kill it. So I want to get rid of this pastel, just from that bit, so that I can get purer pastel on with the side. Look how lovely and bright that is now. Letting the undercolour just glow through a bit. But I want to actually blend that back in a bit down there, so I'm going to kill it a bit there. And then pick up on the warmer colours. Get rid of these bits of loose, just make sure you don't inhale them. Colours are supposed to be harmless, but even so it's not a good idea for your lungs to. You can see now a bit more what's happening. Green's going to bring the reds out. Green is the opposite in the colour cycle to the reds, and this one I'm using is quite a turquoise green, it's quite a bluey green. Explore and have fun, experiment and have fun, try your pastels out and try all sorts of ways that you know from other experience, if you have it with watercolours and with acrylics. Try those out with pastels as well. Use mixed medium. I'm just making marks about what's here at the moment and gradually building up and tightening up from loose to tight, because we can't go tight to loose, but we can go loose to tight at any time. Put that one down, put that one down, come back with my lighter ones, and now we can start to put in some of these much lighter stems that are happening in the... So we've got most of our lights. We want to start really working up the very lights now. These little bits of blue that are reflecting behind, which will make these reds sing out. The way that these blues come up into here, and now they're coming in to link in around these other flowers. And suddenly we've got a mass of leaves, and there's all sorts of ways we could do this, but just giving you some of these quite interesting effects. That massive colour would have been a lot brighter and I think more intense if I'd used the acrylic inks, which I would normally do with something like this. But even so, it just gives you an idea of the amount of textures we can work up with water and brushes. Now those coats will be left alone. We don't want to put anything else onto those. They're quite adequate. And that's it. We'll stop at that, just as it's given you an idea. I'll show you a few others now. Well, that's it from me on this short film, and a little bit of advice about the Unison pastels and my feelings, and some tips for you as well. What I'd like to show you just as we finish though is, although they send them in boxes like this, which are very useful to have and to carry about, obviously if you have a lot of pastels there are other ways to carry them. And one other thing I have is this lovely box here, which allows the lid to be slid off, and inside you have a lot more pastels of many different colours and varieties, and you can see I've got my harder bright pastels there as well. So this is a very nice way to carry pastels too, a little bit more robust, you might say. And that panel just slides into there, and we have a handle here to carry them by. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this film. Just one more small tip, and that is that if you want to clean your pastels up, just put them into a jam jar of ground rice, even rice will do it, and shake them up gently, and that will work, and they'll be perfectly clean at the end of it. Down through things. Very warm darks. A minute. Well, there we are inside. Next is to take it off there and put it into this mountain frame I've got spare here. I think it should look smashing. A bit lower, that's it. So, you get that onto there. If I turn that over now, it's going to be in the right place. Makes sense to you? Now I can put some heavier tape on the back here and slide in the back panel. My gun is not here, it's in France, but hopefully these existing staples will last long enough to... You can get some very nice frames in junk sales and so on. This is a proper nice antique and high quality frame, but do make sure you get a really nice one. It's no good getting dashed and dented ones. Right then, let's see what that looks like, shall we? That's that. Looks nice, doesn't it? Put them there and we'll photograph it properly. Here we go, glazed and mounted and framed. This very deep purple just coming in with some of these darker close details. It just is so much fun being outside in the sunshine when we can get it in England and working from life. Don't be afraid of it. You'll learn a lot more, and by learning what you learn out in reality, by making mistakes, by having fun, by being under pressure here, you'll take it back with you into the studio.